You always think you know the people closest to you, until they show you exactly why you shouldn't have trusted them. My name is Helen Matthews. I'm 64 years old, and I live in Omaha, Nebraska. After losing my husband, George, I thought the worst was behind me. We'd been married for 42 years. He was my rock. I barely had time to grieve before my daughter-in-law, Melanie, practically insisted on moving in to help me adjust. At first, I was grateful. I thought, maybe I raised a son who picked a woman with a kind heart. But sometimes, kindness is just a mask. She said she wanted to help me with bills, groceries, the paperwork. I didn't think anything of it when she asked for access to some of George's accounts, just to get things organized. But a late-night email notification changed everything. If this story resonated with your soul, hit the subscribe button and let me know in the comments what country you're listening from. The air in Omaha felt heavier after George's funeral, like the world itself was mourning him. I stood by his grave, clutching the folded flag they'd handed me, though I barely remember who gave it to me. My hands trembled, not from the chill of the Nebraska autumn, but from the hollow ache in my chest. 42 years with my husband, my George, and now he was gone. Just like that. A heart attack, they said. No warning, no goodbye. One moment he was laughing over his burnt toast, teasing me about my cooking, and the next, he was still. Too still. I didn't cry at the funeral, not because I wasn't broken, but because the tears wouldn't come. They were stuck somewhere deep, tangled in disbelief. My son Ryan couldn't even be there. He was halfway across the world, stationed in some desert I couldn't pronounce, tied to a military contract that wouldn't let him go. "I'll be home soon, Mom," he'd said over a crackling video call, his voice thick. "I'm so sorry." I told him it was okay, that I'd be fine, but I wasn't. Not really. That's when Melanie stepped in. My daughter-in-law, with her soft voice and warm brown eyes, appeared at my side as the last of the mourners drifted away. She wore a black dress that looked too polished, too perfect for a funeral, but I pushed the thought aside. Grief makes you notice strange things. She touched my arm, her fingers light but firm. "Helen, you shouldn't be alone right now," she said, her voice steady, almost practiced. "Let me take care of you, like you've always taken care of us." I looked at her, searching her face for something. Sincerity, maybe. Her eyes held mine, unblinking, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of gratitude. Ryan had married her 5 years ago, and while we'd never been close, she'd always been polite, charming even. I thought maybe I'd misjudged her cool demeanor, her tendency to keep me at arm's length. Maybe this was her way of stepping up. "Thank you, Melanie," I said, my voice hoarse. That means a lot." She smiled, a small, careful curve of her lips. "It's what family does." 2 days later, she arrived at my doorstep with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box stuffed with kitchen gadgets. I stood in the doorway, watching her haul her things inside, her movements quick and efficient. "You didn't have to move in," I said, trying to sound gracious, but feeling a prickle of unease. "I don't want to be a burden." "Burden?" She laughed, a bright musical sound that felt out of place in the quiet house. "Helen, your family, this is where I want to be." She set the box down in the kitchen and turned to me, her hands on her hips. "Besides, you've got enough on your plate. Let me handle the little things, bills, groceries, all that nonsense. You focus on, healing." Healing. The word sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else's life. But I nodded, because what else could I do? She was here, offering help when I felt like I was drowning. I didn't have the energy to question it. Not then. The first week, Melanie was a whirlwind. She sorted through the pile of sympathy cards on the dining table, organized the fridge, even dusted the living room shelves where George's old model airplane sat. "You don't need to do all this," I told her one morning, watching her scrub the kitchen counter with a vigor that seemed almost aggressive. She glanced up, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. I want to. You've been through enough, Helen. Let me take the load off. Her tone was warm, but there was something in her eyes, a sharpness, like she was studying me. I brushed it off. Grief, I told myself. It makes you see things that aren't there. But something about how quickly she settled in gnawed at me. The way she claimed the guest room, rearranging furniture without asking. The way she answered my phone when it rang, saying, "Oh, it's just a telemarketer," before I could reach for it. Small things, but they added up. One night, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Yeah, I'm here now. It's all going fine. Just give me time." I froze, my hand on the banister, waiting for more, but she hung up and turned, startling when she saw me. "Helen." She pressed a hand to her chest, laughing softly. "You scared me. Everything okay?" "Who is that?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Oh, just a friend checking in." She waved a hand, dismissive. "You know how people get nosy when there's a death in the family." I nodded, but the unease grew. Why had she been whispering? And why did her smile feel like a door slamming shut? By the second week, Melanie had taken over the mail. She'd bring it in each morning, sorting through envelopes before I could see them. Junk Bill," she'd mutter, tossing most into a pile she promised to deal with. One afternoon, I caught her slipping an envelope into her purse. "What's that?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She didn't flinch. "Just some insurance stuff," she said, patting her purse. "George's policy. I was going to look it over tonight, save you the headache." "Insurance?" My stomach tightened. George had a life insurance policy, a modest one we'd set up years ago. I hadn't thought about it since his death. "I can look at it," I said, holding out my hand. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Helen, you don't need to stress about this. I've got it handled. You trust me, don't you?" The question hung between us, heavy. Did I trust her? I wanted to. She was Ryan's wife, family. But something in her tone, the way she clutched her purse a little too tightly, made my skin prickle. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "Just keep me in the loop, okay?" "Absolutely," she said, her voice smooth as glass. But she didn't hand me the envelope. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet without George's snoring, the familiar creak of his footsteps. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Melanie's words. "You trust me, don't you?" The question felt less like reassurance and more like a challenge. Around midnight, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. An email notification from my bank, one I rarely checked because George had always handled our finances. The subject line made my heart lurch. Account access changed. I opened it, my hands shaking. The email confirmed that a new user had been added to our joint account, Melanie's name, clear as day. I sat up, my breath catching. I hadn't authorized that. Had I? My mind raced, trying to recall if I'd signed something, agreed to something in my fog of grief. But I hadn't. I was sure of it. I crept downstairs, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. Melanie's purse sat on the kitchen counter, the envelope from earlier peeking out. I hesitated, guilt twisting in my gut. This was wrong, wasn't it? Snooping through her things? But this was my house, my husband's money, my life. I reached for the envelope, my heart pounding. The paper crinkled as I pulled it out. It was from the insurance company, addressed to me. I scanned the text, my eyes catching on numbers. $250,000, the payout amount. My throat tightened. George had always said it was enough to keep me comfortable, to cover the house, the bills. But at the bottom, in fine print, was something else. A request to redirect the funds to a new account. An account number I didn't recognize. "Helen?" Melanie's voice cut through the silence, sharp and sudden. I spun around, the envelope still in my hand. She stood in the doorway, her hair mussed from sleep, but her eyes were wide, alert. "What are you doing?" I clutched the envelope, my voice trembling. What's this, Melanie? Why is George's insurance money going to a different account? Her face softened, but it felt rehearsed. Oh, Helen, you're up late worrying about nothing. That's just a formality. I was setting up a separate account to keep things organized. You don't need to stress. Whose account is it? I cut her off, my voice louder now. Because it's not mine. She blinked, her smile faltering for a split second. Then she stepped closer, her voice low, almost soothing. Helen, you're exhausted. Grief does this, makes you see things that aren't there. Let's talk in the morning, okay? But I didn't want to talk in the morning. I wanted answers now. And as she reached for the envelope, her fingers brushing mine, I realized something chilling. I didn't know the woman standing in my kitchen. Not really. And I wasn't sure I ever had. Do you think it's ever wise to give someone full access to your finances, even family? Let me know in the comments. Your story might help someone else out there. I stood frozen in the kitchen, the insurance envelope trembling in my hand, Melanie's eyes locked on mine. Her words, "You're exhausted, grief does this," hung in the air, smooth and practiced, but they didn't soothe me. They felt like a deflection, a wall she was building between me and the truth. My heart pounded as I tightened my grip on the envelope, the fine print about the redirected account number burning in my mind. "This isn't nothing, Melanie," I said, my voice low but steady. "Whose account is this?" She sighed, crossing her arms, her posture relaxed in a way that felt almost mocking. "Helen, you're blowing this out of proportion. It's late. You're not thinking clearly. Let me take that." She reached for the envelope again, but I stepped back, my shoulder brushing the counter. "No," I said, sharper than I intended. "I want to know what's going on, now." For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Irritation, maybe, or calculation. But then her face softened, and she tilted her head, like she was comforting a child. "Okay, fine. If it'll help you sleep, I'll show you the paperwork tomorrow. It's all above board, I promise." She paused, her voice dropping. "You don't think I'd do anything to hurt you, do you?" The question was a trap, and I felt it. If I said yes, I'd sound paranoid. If I said no, I'd be lying. I didn't trust her, not anymore. But I was too tired, too raw to keep pushing. "We'll talk tomorrow," I muttered, shoving the envelope back into her purse. Her smile returned, tight and triumphant, as I turned and climbed the stairs, my mind racing. Tomorrow I'd get answers. Tomorrow I'd call the insurance company myself. But tomorrow came with a different kind of shock. I woke to the buzz of my phone on the nightstand, the screen glowing in the dim morning light. Another email from the bank, time-stamped 2:47 a.m. My stomach dropped as I opened it, the subject line stark. "Transaction alert, $250,000 deposit transferred." I sat up, my breath catching. The email detailed a transfer from George's life insurance payout, the exact amount I'd seen in the envelope, moved to an account I didn't recognize. But that wasn't the worst of it. Buried in the fine print was a line that made my blood run cold. Beneficiary change confirmed. New beneficiary, Melanie Matthews. I read it again, then a third time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less horrifying. Melanie had changed the beneficiary on George's policy. My George, who'd worked overtime for years to secure that money for me, for our future. And now, somehow, it was hers. My hands shook as I pulled on a cardigan and stormed downstairs. Melanie was in the kitchen, humming softly as she poured coffee, the picture of calm. The sight of her, so at ease while my world crumbled, ignited something in me. Anger, raw and unfamiliar. "Melanie," I said, my voice cutting through her humming. She turned, her eyebrows lifting in mild surprise. "Morning, Helen. Coffee?" She held up the pot, her smile as warm as ever. "Did you touch George's policy?" I asked, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. I didn't care about pleasantries. Not now. Her smile faltered, just for a second, before she set the pot down and leaned against the counter. Touch it? Of course not. Why would you even ask that? I held up my phone, the email still open. Because I got an email this morning. The life insurance money, $250,000, was transferred, and the beneficiary was changed to you. Care to explain that? For a moment, she didn't move. Her eyes flicked to the phone, then back to me, and I saw it. A flash of something cold, calculating, before she masked it with a laugh. Helen, that's ridiculous. It must be some kind of clerical error. These things happen all the time with insurance companies. You know how they are, always messing up paperwork. Clerical error? My voice rose, trembling with disbelief. The beneficiary doesn't just change by accident, Melanie. Someone did this. And you're the only one who's been handling the accounts. She crossed her arms, her expression shifting to one of wounded innocence. Are you seriously accusing me, after everything I've done for you? I moved in here to help, Helen. I've been sorting through your bills, your mail, your life while you... She stopped, catching herself, but the unspoken words hung between us. While you grieve. I didn't ask you to take over everything, I snapped. I let you help because I trusted you. But this isn't help. This is... I stopped. The word theft caught in my throat. I couldn't say it. Not yet. Melanie sighed, stepping closer, her voice softening. Look, I get it. You're upset. This looks bad. But I swear, I didn't change anything. Let me call the insurance company today, okay? I'll sort it out. You don't need to worry. But I was worried. The more she talked, the clearer the pattern became, and it terrified me. The redirected mail, the changed passwords, the whispered phone calls, and now this. It wasn't just one thing. It was a web, and I was caught in it. No, I said, stepping back. I'll call them myself. Her eyes narrowed, just for a moment, before she shrugged. Suit yourself, but you're wasting your time. There's nothing to find. She turned back to the coffee pot, dismissing me, but her shoulders were tense, like she was bracing for something. I retreated to the living room, my phone still clutched in my hand. My fingers hovered over the insurance company's number, but I hesitated. What if she was right? What if this was a mistake? Grief could cloud your judgment, I knew that. But my gut screamed otherwise. Melanie's calm, her quick answers, felt too polished, too prepared. And that account number, the one in the envelope, kept nagging at me. I needed to know whose it was. I opened my laptop, hand still unsteady, and logged into the bank's website. The account details were locked behind a security question I couldn't answer. George had set it up years ago. Frustration burned in my chest, but I wasn't giving up. I searched my email for anything related to the insurance policy, scrolling through months of messages. That's when I found it. An email from 2 weeks ago, buried in my spam folder, confirming a request to update the policy's contact information. The new email listed wasn't mine. It was Melanie's. My breath hitched. This wasn't a clerical error. She'd done this deliberately, step by step, while I was too lost in grief to notice. But why? Ryan was her husband. Why would she need to steal from me? Unless Ryan didn't know. The thought hit me like a punch. What if this wasn't about helping me at all? What if Melanie had her own plans, ones that didn't include me or even Ryan? I glanced toward the kitchen, where Melanie was now wiping down the counter, her movements slow and deliberate. She looked so normal, so harmless. But I wasn't fooled anymore. I needed proof, something solid to confront her with, something she couldn't talk her way out of. And I needed it before she realized I was onto her. The house felt smaller now, the walls closing in. Every creak of the floorboards, every glance from Melanie, carried weight. I didn't know how deep this went, but I knew one thing. I wasn't letting her take George's legacy without a fight. Not now, not ever. I sat in the living room, my laptop open, but my eyes fixed on the kitchen doorway, where Melanie hummed softly, wiping down the counter with slow, deliberate strokes. Her calm was infuriating, a mask that hid the truth I was only beginning to grasp. The email about the beneficiary change, Melanie's name replacing mine on George's life insurance policy, burned in my mind. Her explanation, that smooth dismissal of a clerical error, felt like a lie polished to perfection. I wanted to confront her again, to demand the truth, but I knew she'd twist her way out of it. I needed proof, something undeniable, and I needed it now. "I'm heading out for groceries," Melanie called, her voice bright as she grabbed her purse. "Need anything special, Helen?" She poked her head into the living room, her smile as warm as ever, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "I'm fine." "All right, I'll be back in a couple hours." She lingered for a moment, her gaze flicking to my laptop, and I felt a prickle of unease. Did she know I was digging? But then she turned, her heels clicking on the hardwood as she left. The front door shut, and the house fell silent, save for the faint hum of the fridge. I didn't waste time. My heart pounded as I climbed the stairs to the guest room, Melanie's room now. The door was ajar, and I hesitated, guilt tugging at me. This was an invasion, a line I'd never crossed. But George's money, our future, was slipping through my fingers, and Melanie was the one pulling the strings. I pushed the door open. Her room was neat, almost sterile. The bed was made, the suitcase tucked against the wall, but her laptop sat on the small desk, its lid half closed. I froze, listening for any sound. A car pulling back into the driveway, a key in the lock. Nothing. I crossed the room, my hands trembling as I opened the laptop. The screen flickered to life, prompting a password. My stomach sank. Of course it was locked. But then I noticed a sticky note on the desk, half hidden under a pen. Ryan 2020. A guess, a hope. I typed it in, and the screen unlocked. I exhaled, my pulse racing as I clicked on her email. The inbox loaded, and I scrolled, my eyes scanning for anything familiar. My name, George's, the insurance company. There were dozens of emails, most mundane, but then I saw it, a folder labeled Estate. My breath caught as I opened it. Inside were emails I hadn't sent, but they were signed with my name. My hands shook as I clicked on the first one, dated 3 weeks ago, addressed to the insurance company. Subject, update to beneficiary information. Dear Sir or Madam, this is Helen Matthews. I'd like to update the beneficiary on my husband's life insurance policy to Melanie Matthews, my daughter-in-law. Please confirm receipt of this request. Best regards, Helen Matthews. I stared, my chest tightening. That wasn't me. I hadn't written this. The words, formal and precise, mimicked how I might sound, but they were a lie. Melanie had written this, pretending to be me. I clicked through more emails, each one a punch to the gut. Requests to change account access, to redirect statements, to streamline payments, all signed with my name. She'd been building a paper trail, making it look like I'd willingly handed over control. Then I saw one that stopped me cold. The subject line was stark: transfer request, close beneficiary claim, redirect to new account. It was dated the day after George's funeral, sent to the insurance company with an attachment. A forged signature that looked eerily like mine. I opened it, my vision blurring as I read. Please close the beneficiary claim for George Matthews and redirect the $250,000 payout to the following account. The account number matched the one from the envelope I'd found in her purse. My knees buckled, and I gripped the desk to steady myself. She'd done this days after George died, while I was still numb with grief, barely able to get out of bed. But then I noticed the email's timestamp, 1:32 a.m., sent from this laptop. I checked the sent folder, my fingers clumsy on the trackpad, and found a draft of the same email, dated 2 weeks before George's death. My heart stopped. Before George died? That couldn't be right. I opened the draft, my hands shaking so badly I could barely click. The text was nearly identical, down to the account number, but it hadn't been sent. It was a plan, a template, waiting for the right moment. Melanie hadn't just taken advantage of George's death, she'd been preparing for it. The realization hit me like a wave, cold and suffocating. Had she known George was sick? Had she done something? The thought was too horrific to hold, but it lodged in my mind, sharp and unyielding. I leaned back, my breath shallow. The room felt too small, the air too thick. Melanie wasn't just stealing. She was calculated, patient, and far more dangerous than I'd imagined. I needed to act, to call the police, the insurance company, someone. But what proof did I have? Screenshots maybe, but would that be enough? She'd covered her tracks so well, making it look like I'd authorized everything. And Ryan, what would he think? Would he believe me over his wife? The sound of a car engine snapped me out of my spiral. I glanced out the window and saw Melanie's sedan pulling into the driveway. Panic surged through me. I closed the laptop, careful to leave it exactly as I'd found it, and slipped out of the room, my heart hammering. I was halfway down the stairs when the front door opened and Melanie's voice called out, "Helen? You here?" "In the living room," I said, forcing calm into my voice as I sat on the couch, my laptop open to a random web page. My hands were still shaking, but I hid them in my lap. She appeared in the doorway, a grocery bag in one arm, her smile as bright as ever. "Got some fresh veggies for dinner. Thought we could make that stir-fry you like." Her eyes flicked to my laptop, then back to me, and I felt a chill. Did she suspect something? "Sounds great," I said, my throat tight. I needed to keep her at ease, to act normal until I could figure out my next move. But every word felt like a lie, every glance a test. She chatted about the store, the weather, but I barely heard her. My mind was racing, piecing together the timeline. The draft email, written before George's death, the forged signatures, the whispered phone calls. It was all connected, and I was the only one who could stop her. But how? She was in my house, handling my mail, my accounts, my life. And she'd been planning this for longer than I could fathom. The woman I'd let into my home wasn't just a thief. She was a predator, and I was her prey. I needed to be smarter, to outmaneuver her before she realized I knew. Because if she did, I wasn't sure what she'd do next. I sat on the couch, my laptop open to a meaningless web page, forcing a smile as Melanie chatted about stir-fry and grocery deals. Her voice was light, her movements casual, but I saw her now, not as my daughter-in-law, but as a threat. The draft email I'd found on her laptop, written before George's death, haunted me. It wasn't just theft, it was premeditated, a plan set in motion while my husband was still alive. My hands trembled in my lap, hidden from her view, as I nodded along, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was screaming. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, to shake the truth out of her. But I couldn't. Not yet. She was too careful, too clever, and I had no solid proof, only screenshots and suspicions. If I tipped my hand now, she'd slip away and I'd lose everything. "I'm going to start chopping veggies," Melanie said, heading to the kitchen. "You sure you're okay, Helen? You look a little pale." "Just tired," I lied, closing my laptop. "Think I'll rest for a bit." "Take it easy," she called, her tone so warm it made my skin crawl. I climbed the stairs, my mind racing. I needed a plan, someone who could help me untangle this web before Melanie realized I was onto her. And I knew exactly who to call. The next morning, I waited until Melanie left for another errand, her third this week, each one suspiciously vague. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my purse and the USB drive where I'd saved screenshots of her emails. My destination was George's attorney, Walter Klein, a gruff but loyal man who'd handled our legal affairs for decades. If anyone could help, it was him. Walter's office was a small, cluttered space in downtown Omaha, smelling of old coffee and leather. He looked up from his desk as I entered, his bushy eyebrows lifting. "Helen, didn't expect to see you so soon. How you holding up?" "Not well," I said, closing the door behind me. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I need your help, Walter. It's about George's life insurance. And Melanie." His eyes narrowed. "Sit down. Tell me everything." I did. The redirected mail, the changed passwords, the late-night email about the beneficiary switch, and the damning discovery on Melanie's laptop, emails forged in my name, including one drafted before George died. I handed him the USB drive, my hand steady now, fueled by purpose. "She's stealing from me," I said. "And I think she planned this before George's heart attack." Walter leaned back, his chair creaking, and rubbed his jaw. "That's a hell of an accusation, Helen. But these emails..." He plugged the USB into his computer, his frown deepening as he scrolled through the screenshots. "If she's impersonating you, that's fraud. And if she was planning this before George passed, that raises questions I don't even want to touch without evidence." "What kind of questions?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He met my gaze, his expression grim. "Let's just say we need to tread carefully. For now, these emails are a start, but we need to be smart about this." "Smart how?" I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "She's in my house, Walter, handling my accounts, my mail. I can't just wait." "You won't," he said, his voice firm. "We're going to set a trap, but you can't let her know you suspect her. Not a word, Helen. Can you do that?" I nodded, though the thought of going back to that house, smiling at Melanie while knowing what she'd done, made my stomach churn. "What's the plan?" Walter outlined it with the precision of a man who'd seen too many betrayals. "First, we'd report the fraud to the insurance company, but quietly, no alerts to Melanie. He'd draft a letter demanding an immediate freeze on the policy payout, citing suspected unauthorized changes. Next, we'd loop in the police, but not for an arrest, not yet. They'd start a paper trail, gathering evidence without tipping her off. The key was to let Melanie think she was in control, to keep signing documents and making moves that would build a case against her." "She's cocky," Walter said. "That's her weakness. Let her believe she's outsmarted you. For now." I swallowed hard, the weight of it sinking in. "And then what?" "Then we catch her with her hand in the till," he said, a glint in his eye. "But you've got to play your part. Go home, act normal. Don't touch her laptop again, she might notice, and keep me posted on anything new." I left his office with a plan, but no peace. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying Melanie's smile, her lies, the draft email that suggested she'd known George wouldn't make it. The implication was too dark to face head-on, but it lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. Had she done something to him? Or had she just known he was frail, his heart weaker than we thought? Either way, she'd been ready, waiting for her moment. When I got home, Melanie was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup. "Hey, you were out early," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "Everything okay?" "Just needed some air," I said, hanging my coat by the door. My voice sounded normal, but my skin prickled under her gaze. Could she tell I'd been plotting? I forced a smile. "Soup smells good." "Thanks," she said, her eyes lingering on me a moment too long before she turned back to the stove. "Thought we could use something cozy tonight." I nodded and retreated to the living room, my heart racing. She thought she had me fooled, that I was the grieving widow too broken to notice her schemes. I let her believe it, for now. But every step I took, every word I spoke, was part of the trap Walter and I had set. The insurance company was already reviewing the case, and Walter had promised to expedite the police report. Soon, Melanie's carefully laid plans would collapse under the weight of her own greed. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, George's absence a physical ache. I missed his warmth, his quiet strength, but more than that, I missed the certainty of trust. Melanie had taken that from me, from us. But I wasn't helpless. Not anymore. The trap was set, and I was ready to play my part, to watch her every move until she made a mistake. Because she would. She had to. The house creaked and I tensed, listening for Melanie's footsteps. Was she awake, plotting her next move? Or was she sleeping soundly, confident in her victory? Either way, I was done being her pawn. This was my home, my life, and I'd fight for it with everything I had. I lay in bed, the silence of the house pressing against me, every creak a reminder of Melanie's presence downstairs. The plan Walter and I had set, reporting the fraud quietly, freezing the insurance payout, building a case, felt like a lifeline, but it demanded patience. I had to play the grieving widow, oblivious to Melanie's schemes, while the authorities gathered evidence. It was torture, smiling at her over dinner, nodding at her lies, knowing she'd been planning to steal George's legacy before he even died. But I held on, fueled by the promise of justice. She thought she'd outsmarted me. I let her believe it, biding my time until she made her final mistake. For days, I kept up the act. "You're a godsend, Melanie," I'd say when she sorted the mail or paid a bill, my voice soft, grateful. She'd smile, her eyes gleaming with something I now recognized as smugness. "Anything for you, Helen," she'd reply, and I'd swallow the bile in my throat. Walter checked in daily, his voice low over the phone. "The insurance companies flagged the account," he told me. "The police are ready. Just keep her comfortable. One more move and we've got her." That move came faster than I expected. One afternoon, Melanie announced she was running to the bank to fix a glitch with one of George's accounts. My pulse quickened. This was it. I'd tipped off Walter the night before, and he'd coordinated with the police to monitor the account in real time. "Be careful," he'd warned. "If she suspects you, she might bolt." I sat at the kitchen table, pretending to read a magazine, my phone hidden in my lap. Melanie was in the living room, her laptop open, typing furiously. I'd caught her using it earlier, her fingers flying over the keys before she snapped it shut. Now, I watched through the doorway, my heart pounding as she glanced at me, then back at the screen. "Everything okay?" I called, keeping my tone light. "Just some paperwork," she said, her voice clipped. "Nothing you need to worry about." But I was worried, because I was watching her every move. My phone buzzed silently, a text from Walter. "She's accessing the account. Police are on standby. Stay calm." I gripped the magazine, my knuckles white, as Melanie's fingers paused, then clicked. I knew that sound, the final submit on a transaction. My breath caught. She'd done it. Another transfer, bold as ever, thinking she was untouchable. The front door burst open, and 2 officers stepped inside, their badges glinting. Melanie's head snapped up, her face paling as they approached. "Melanie Matthews," one said, his voice firm. "You're under arrest for fraud and identity theft." She froze, her laptop still open, the screen glowing with the transfer confirmation. What is this?" she stammered, her eyes darting to me. I stood, my legs trembling but my voice steady. "How dare you steal from the man who took you in like a daughter?" I said, the words spilling out, raw and furious. "George trusted you. I trusted you." Melanie's mask cracked, her lips twisting into a sneer. "You don't understand. I deserved it more than you," she spat, her voice venomous. "You had your life with him. I was stuck with Ryan, scraping by. That money was my way out." The officers cuffed her, her words echoing in my ears as they led her out. I sank into a chair, the weight of her betrayal crashing over me. She'd planned this, manipulated us, all for her own gain. But I'd fought back, and she'd lost. The house was quiet again, but it felt different now. Mine, reclaimed. George's memory was safe, his legacy protected. I'd faced the truth and won, but the cost lingered, a wound that would take time to heal. The sound of Melanie's venomous words, "I deserved it more than you," still rang in my ears as the police led her out of my home, her wrists cuffed, her face a mix of defiance and panic. The officers' radios crackled, their boots heavy on the hardwood, and then the door shut behind them. Silence settled over the house, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that follows a storm, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. I stood in the living room, my hands trembling, the laptop still open on the coffee table, its screen frozen on the transfer confirmation that had sealed her fate. I'd outsmarted her, with Walter's help and the police on standby, but the victory felt hollow. My daughter-in-law, the woman I'd welcomed into my family, had tried to steal everything George and I had built, and worse, she'd planned it before he was even gone. I sank into the couch, my legs unsteady. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. But it wasn't over. Melanie was gone, but Ryan, my son, her husband, was still halfway across the world, oblivious to the betrayal that had unfolded in his absence. How would I tell him? How could I explain that the woman he loved, the woman he'd vowed to build a life with, was a stranger who'd preyed on his family? The next few days were a blur. Walter called to confirm that Melanie had been charged with identity theft, financial fraud, and elder abuse, a litany of crimes that made my stomach churn. "The evidence is airtight," he said, his voice steady over the phone. "Your screenshots, the forged emails, the bank records, they've got her dead to rights. She's not talking her way out of this." The insurance company had frozen the payout, and the funds were being redirected back to me. But it didn't feel like a win. It felt like a wound, raw and gaping, that no amount of justice could fully heal. I spent hours alone in the house, sorting through the wreckage Melanie had left behind. Her belongings were still in the guest room. Clothes folded neatly in the suitcase, a half-empty bottle of perfume on the dresser. I didn't touch them. The police had taken her laptop and purse as evidence, but the small things, the traces of her presence, haunted me. Every creak of the floorboards made me flinch, as if she might walk through the door with another lie, another smile. I kept the lights on at night, unable to shake the feeling that I was still being watched. Ryan's return came a week later. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of coffee I didn't intend to drink, when I heard the front door open. "Mom?" His voice, rough from travel and worry, broke the silence. I turned, and there he was, tall, broad-shouldered, his desert-tanned face lined with exhaustion. His duffel bag hit the floor, and he crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling me into a hug. For a moment, I let myself sink into it, the familiar warmth of my son grounding me. But the truth loomed, and I couldn't delay it. "Ryan," I said, pulling back, my voice unsteady. "We need to talk." He frowned, his dark eyes searching mine. "What's going on? Where's Melanie? I tried calling her, but her phone's off." I gestured to the table, and we sat, the weight of what I was about to say pressing down on me. I told him everything. Her offer to help, the redirected mail, the forged emails, the beneficiary change, the draft she'd written before George died. I told him about the trap, the police, her arrest. His face changed as I spoke, shock giving way to disbelief, then a quiet, devastating heartbreak. When I finished, he stared at the table, his hands clenched into fists. "You married a stranger," I said softly, my voice breaking, "and I almost let her destroy everything your father built." He shook his head, his jaw tight. I don't understand. Why would she do this? We were fine. She never said anything about money, about wanting." He trailed off, his voice cracking. Did I miss something? Was I gone too long? I reached for his hand, my heart aching for him. "This isn't your fault, Ryan. She fooled us both, but she's paying for it now." He pulled his hand away, standing abruptly. "I need to see her. I need to hear it from her." "Ryan," I started, but he was already grabbing his keys. "She's in custody. They might not let you." "I have to try," he said, his voice raw. "I need to know why." I let him go, knowing he needed answers as much as I had. But as the door closed behind him, I felt a pang of fear. What if Melanie manipulated him, spun a story to pull him back in? I pushed the thought aside. Ryan was hurt, but he was smart. He'd see her for what she was, just as I had. The days that followed were quieter, but the healing was slow. The charges against Melanie piled up, each one a brick in the wall of justice. Walter kept me updated. Her bail was denied, her court date set. The police found more evidence, bank accounts in her name, hidden transactions stretching back months. She'd been siphoning small amounts from George's accounts even before his death, testing the waters. The betrayal cut deeper with every revelation, but it also strengthened my resolve. I'd fought for George's legacy, and I'd won. Ryan came back after visiting Melanie, his face drawn. She admitted it, he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. Not all of it, but enough. Said she felt trapped, like she'd never have a life of her own. But she didn't apologize. Not really. He looked at me, his eyes red. I'm sorry, Mum. I brought her into our lives. I squeezed his hand. You loved her. That's not a crime. We move forward now, together. And we did. The house felt lighter with Melanie gone, the shadows less oppressive. I started sleeping with the lights off again, trusting the quiet. Justice had been served, but the scars remained, a reminder to guard what mattered most. If someone close to you betrayed your trust, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear from you. The road ahead wasn't easy, but it was ours. George's memory, our home, our family. It was all safe now, reclaimed from the woman who'd tried to take it. I looked at Ryan, at the strength in his eyes despite the pain, and knew we'd be okay. We'd rebuild, not just for ourselves, but for the man who'd given us everything. Do you think it's ever wise to give someone full access to your finances, even family? Let me know in the comments. Your story might help someone else out there. The kitchen table where Ryan and I sat, grappling with Melanie's betrayal, became a place of healing in the weeks that followed. His quiet admission of her confession, she'd felt trapped, unapologetic even in custody, marked the end of her hold over us. Melanie's charges, from identity theft to elder abuse, ensured she'd face years behind bars, and the insurance funds were safely returned to me. But the money wasn't just a number. It was George's legacy, his years of hard work, and I refused to let it sit idle. I wanted it to mean something, to protect others from the pain I'd endured. With the recovered $250,000, I founded a local support group in Omaha for widows vulnerable to elder fraud. I called it George's Light, a name that felt right, like a beacon in his memory. The group met weekly in a community center, a small room filled with women who'd faced their own betrayals, con artists, greedy relatives, or, like me, family they'd trusted too much. We shared stories, legal advice, and strength, guided by a lawyer I hired with the funds to offer free consultations. Word spread, and soon the group grew, drawing widows from neighboring towns. At our first anniversary meeting, a woman named Clara, her eyes teary, gripped my hand. You saved me from signing over my savings, she said. Thank you for speaking up. The room applauded, and I felt George's presence, warm and steady, like he was proud. The community rallied around me, neighbors stopping by with casseroles and kind words. You're a fighter, Helen, my friend Marla said, handing me a pie. George would have loved this. Their support mended the cracks Melanie had left, reminding me I wasn't alone. One evening, I sat in George's old armchair, the house quiet except for the tick of the clock. I traced the armrest, where his hand used to rest, and reflected on the past months. Losing George was the hardest thing. His laugh, his burnt toast mornings, his steady love, gone in a heartbeat. But letting someone disrespect his memory, that was never going to happen under my roof. I'd fought for him, for us, and I'd won. The scars remained, but they were proof of my strength, not my weakness. Have you ever been taken advantage of while grieving? Don't suffer in silence. Share your story and help others. And if you found this story powerful, Hit that subscribe button so you never miss one again.